Someone bangs a pan with a spoon and shouts to wake the fortified camp. Encred lies on a bed with his eyes closed and a hand pressed to his forehead, disturbed by a loud, relentless banging. Saxon sits on the edge of his bed, holding a boot and looking inside after feeling something within it, while Encred observes him from the adjacent bed. Encred lies on his back and places an arm over his forehead, disturbed by the loud racket. A shirtless, tattooed man holds an axe and declares his name is Encred, while Rem looks on from behind him with a surprised expression. Alden examines a small, dark, intricate object held in his hands. Encred sleeps deeply in a bed with his mouth slightly agape, next to a wooden bedside table holding a mug. Saxon sits on a wooden crate next to a tent, intently sharpening a small knife with a whetstone. An army of armored soldiers stands silhouetted against the setting sun, holding spears and flags that bear a shield and sword emblem. Encred opens his mouth wide and shouts the command to charge. He declares he has no special abilities. Armored soldiers clash on the battlefield, swinging swords and raising shields against each other in a chaotic melee. Encred strains behind his sparking shield, bracing against a powerful, unseen attack that forces him to cry out from the impact. Encred screams in exertion, his face contorted in pain as he struggles to hold his sword impaled in the opponent's armored chest. Encred is violently struck, his face grimacing in pain as sweat flies from the impact against his armor. He declares this is the end for him. Saxon stands over the fallen Encred, repeatedly smashing his large armored fist into his prone body. A blood-soaked sword crashes down on an armored figure's small shield, the impact sending a spray of blood into the air. He had no special talent. Encred gasps for air, struggling on the ground from his injuries as he desperately reaches for the fallen sword. Encred knew his dreams were impossibly out of reach. Encred stands at the center of the melee, defending with his shield and swinging his sword at multiple combatants. He clashes blades with Saxon as the chaotic battle rages around them. An arrow buries itself in Encred's shoulder, causing him to stagger back as he roars in a mixture of pain and fury. The narrator continued to dream. Encred gasps for air, his wide purple eyes full of shock as sweat beads on his face. He did not care if everyone mocked him or said that it would never happen. Encred swings his bloody, serrated weapon through the flames, his face strained with a determined expression. He focused on the single condition that mattered, as long as he wielded a sword in his hand. A gloved hand drives a glowing, blood-stained blade forward into its target. Encred collapses as an armored hand withdraws a sword from his torso, blood pouring from the wound as he thinks about his belief that he would one day become a knight. He clutched his old and tattered dream tightly. Encred is impaled through the chest by a sword, blood gushing from the wound. Encred coughs up blood, his face contorted with pain and fury. Encred stands weakly, his legs splattered with blood as he coughs over the blood-soaked ground where his sword lies. Saxon kneels on the blood-stained battlefield, his sword and shield lying discarded beside him amidst the glowing embers. Encred did not know that he would die a meaningless death. A mass of blue-purple energy, shaped like a flame, descends through the dark space surrounded by small sparks. Encred strains intensely, sweat covering his face while his blue eye remains fixed with determination. A vortex of powerful blue and purple energy swirls in the darkness. Encred focuses intently, his strained blue eye wide with exertion as sweat streaks down his face. Ren floats through a dark, star-dusted space, surrounded by luminous blue rings. Their weapons clash in a rapid series of impacts. Encred jolts awake to a loud clanging noise, his eyes wide and a hand covering part of his face. A question forms, asking if it was all a dream. Encred leans forward to investigate something in his boot as Rem watches him intently from the background. Rem's analysis of Encred fails, resulting in a system error. Encred's purple eyes widen with intensity, his brow deeply furrowed as he stares. He is struck by a sense of déjà vu. Encred roars as he blocks a heavy blow with his shield, gripping his sword tightly while standing in the middle of a fiery battle. Encred grits his teeth, sweat dripping down his face as he reacts in shock to a rapid movement just out of his view. Encred is stabbed through the side by a blade and blood splatters from the wound. It happens a second time. An assailant drives a dagger deep into a character's back, blood gushing from the violent wound. It happens a third time. Encred plunges his sword into the chest of his falling opponent, causing blood to splatter from the fatal wound. An announcement declares the arrival of a fourth. Encred stands outside in an apron, repeatedly banging a ladle against a frying pan to wake everyone up. Encred drops the pan and clutches his throat, his eyes widening with intense strain as he chokes. Encred recalls the sensation of an enemy's sword piercing his neck, the excruciating pain, and the blood gushing from his throat. Encred grips his sword and lets out a fierce roar during the battle. Encred charges forward, gripping his sword and shield. He realizes he is reliving this day. Ankrid leaps aggressively into the chaotic battle, his sword raised high as he flies through the air towards his enemies. Ankrid swings his large, blunt weapon downwards with immense force. It happened repeatedly. Ankrid lunges forward in a powerful sweeping motion, his eyes intensely focused as sweat drips down his face. Ankrid lunges forward in his dark armor, his face set with intense determination as he wields a large sword. Ankrid executes the skill, the perfect thrust. Ankrid grimaces intensely, his face covered in sweat as one of his eyes glows with purple energy. Ankrid's eye glows with a pinkish light as he focuses on the 17th sword tip coming at him. Ankrid recoils backward, impaled by a downward striking sword. He marks his 17th death. Ankrid grits his teeth from the strain, his visible eye glowing with a bright blue light. Ankrid throws his head back as a violent spray of blood erupts from his neck. He wishes he had swung his sword more fervently. Ankrid kneels on the ground, black fluid pouring from a gaping wound in his chest as the helmeted Saxon stands over him with his sword drawn. An internal voice laments not having tried harder. Ankrid lies defeated on the ground, enveloped in a swirling red aura as armed soldiers close in around him. Ankrid thinks that maybe he might not have died here. Ankrid floats upside down within a dark, star-speckled void as faint, concentric ripples expand around him. An ornate, chained lantern resembling an hourglass glows brightly, filled with swirling blue mystical energy against a dark, starry sky. A black circular void outlined by a pulsing purple glow emanates a question in white text. "Do you truly believe that?" Ankrid gazes upwards, his dark hair partially obscuring his sharp features and intense blue eyes. Ankrid lies prone on the cosmic ground as a hooded, spectral figure floats above him in a small boat, holding a glowing lantern. Ankrid's pale, translucent face looms from the darkness as he commands his opponent to toil, fail, and surrender. A message appears within a glowing ethereal circle, commanding its target to know they can never surmount the wall and to despair. Ankrid kneels alone in a pool of water, his body slumped forward as ripples spread across the surface under the starry sky. Rem roars, his mouth open wide as blue-purple energy streams from his eyes and forehead. A hand repeatedly bangs a ladle against a frying pan at the camp. Ankrid lies in bed with his hand on his forehead, looking up with a disturbed expression as the sound of clanging metal echoes around him. Rem sits on the bed in dark clothing, watching the shirtless corporal pull on his boots as he teases him for being on time for once. Ankrid looks to his left with a serious expression, warning Rem that there is a bug in his boot. Rem looks down with a puzzled expression, his hand raised near his face. Ankrid brings his foot down, crushing a small vermin on the ground. A bare foot steps down onto a small object, crushing it into fragments. Ankrid struggles to remove something from his boot, yelling at Rem and accusing him of planting it there as a joke. Rem stands nearby holding his sword, calmly denying the accusation and claiming he just saw it crawl in. Ankrid looks upwards with a focused and serious expression. A large insect lies on its back in a puddle of liquid, twitching as it dies. Saxon stands with his back turned, parting a curtain to look out at the bright sky, wondering how many more times he must see the dead bug before the day ends. He took up the sword in his youth. Ankrid screams in fury and lunges forward with his sword. Saxon stands victorious over Ankrid's fallen body, his sword held steady. Ankrid lies on the ground gasping for air, completely defeated. Saxon explains that he learned swordsmanship from a retired mercenary who was passing through his town. Saxon kneels on the ground beside a broken metal pipe, looking down with an impressed expression as he remarks on Ankrid's capability. Ankrid's eyes widen and begin to glow as sweat forms on his face, his expression completely overwhelmed with the hope of becoming a knight. He questions if he could truly be a knight. Ankrid stands with his back turned, surrounded by intense fire and sweeping blue energy as a warrior capable of felling 1,000 enemies. Ankrid's armored hand firmly grips a glowing battle standard bearing a sword and shield emblem. Ankrid is bathed in a dramatic warm light, a figure presented as an invincible hero. Ankrid grimaces, his blue eye glowing intensely as he recalls the minstrel's song and his belief that he was the prophesied knight of the end. He resolves to leave home, setting off to become a knight. Two men sit in a tavern and laugh loudly, one holding a tankard of ale as they mock a newcomer who fell. A man with a large wooden mug laughs and mocks the bandaged Ankrid who sits dejectedly on a crate. He yells that Ankrid dreams of becoming a knight but cowers at a stray dog, questioning who would ever pay him to be a mercenary. Ankrid holds a bandage between his teeth, pulling it tight to wrap his arm as his one visible eye shows a determined expression. Ankrid sits on the wooden floor, his body covered in bandages and his head lowered in thought, his sword leaning against the stone wall beside him. Ankrid trains at night with a bandage covering his eyes, executing an intense sword slash with the village behind him. Ankrid swings his sword in a powerful arc, his face twisted with intense focus as he shouts about lacking talent. Ankrid grits his teeth with fierce determination, his eyes glowing intensely as snow swirls around him. Ankrid's face contorts with effort as he violently swings his sword high overhead. Ankrid plunges his sword deep into the chest of the furry red-eyed beast, which bleeds profusely from the stab wound. Ankrid stands over the defeated monster, his sword held downwards as he gasps for air. He is drenched in sweat, having gained experience and grown in strength and stamina through repeated combat until others began to notice. Ankrid screams with wide-eyed determination, sweat dripping down his marked face as he declares that he is growing stronger and can become a knight. The words "and that burning hope" appear in white text against a black background. Ankrid raises his arms toward the simple sword floating in the air above him. Ankrid lunges forward with a focused expression, thrusting his sword through the falling snow. It was soon crushed. Ankrid's sword strike disarms Saxon, sending his weapon flying as several other blades spin through the air around them. A determined young boy with light hair holds a sword, looking confidently at his opponent who he challenged to a duel. The 12-year-old, having only trained for 6 months, called the man weak. Ankrid kneels hunched over on the dirt path, covering his head with his hands in exhaustion and distress. Ankrid walks across a sun-drenched landscape, holding a sword with its tip pointed toward the ground. Ankrid kneels on the ground with his back turned, a sheathed sword strapped to him, and questions if his hard work is truly worthless. Ankrid's face contorts in agony and despair, sweat covering him as he grits his teeth and questions if there is truly no hope left for him. A shooting star streaks across the night sky above a mountain range while a narrator recalls their longing to be a knight. Ankrid repeatedly strikes a large tree with his thin blade, the blade impacting the wood with each swing. Ankrid strains with immense effort, delivering a powerful, impact-heavy strike. Ankrid trained relentlessly, swinging his sword over and over beside a large tree as the sun set behind the mountains. Ankrid screams, his face contorting with extreme effort as sweat flies from his head. Ankrid grimaces with intense effort, unleashing a powerful downward sword swing. A sharp blade plunges downward at an angle, scattering debris with its speed. Ankrid gasps for breath, his face strained and covered in sweat with his eyes wide and intense. The sun rises over the distant mountains, its light flaring across the sky. Ankrid's intense blue eyes are locked forward as sweat drips down his brow. Numerous deep gashes and claw marks score the surface of a large tree trunk. Ankrid stands dejectedly beside the scarred tree, holding his sword with his shoulders slumped. Ankrid grits his teeth and sweats profusely as he pulls a glowing sword from the flesh of his own left arm. Rem executes a powerful overhead sword swing, cutting through the surrounding dust. Ankrid executes a powerful sword slash, sending dirt and debris flying around him. Ankrid grits his teeth under intense strain, sweat pouring down his face as his pupils radiate a powerful blue light. Ankrid opens his mouth wide in a strained scream, sweat beading on his skin from the exertion. 3 years have passed, and Ankrid now trains alone in a desolate landscape, repeatedly striking a large, barren tree with his weapon. A red flag waves against a blue sky, its emblem of a shield pierced by 3 swords identifying it as the Cyprus Division's 4th Company, 4th Platoon, 4th Squad. Ankrid marches forward, leading his squad of Saxon, Rem, and Auden. He reflects on his new position as the leader of the military's bottom dregs, a role he earned through tireless training, and considers it unglamorous but better than being a wandering mercenary. Ankrid stands with a sword and calls out to Saxon, who sits on a crate looking down at a small object in his hands. Saxon looks down with a subtle smirk on his face. Ankrid approaches Saxon near the tents, who stands with his back mostly turned. Ankrid asks him to fill in for his morning duties. Saxon looks intently to the right side of the frame. Saxon sits casually on a wooden crate, looking down as he tells the corporal he owes him one. Rem turns to his companion, asking with an irritated expression if he saw the look the other man gave him as he walked away. Rem turns with a questioning expression and asks if he is also expected to do the dirty work. Ankrid's blue eyes narrow with determination as he looks forward, stating his want to learn beast heart again. Rem, a man with gray hair tied back and a beard, holds a staff and looks off-panel with a serious, observant expression. Rem looks down with a skeptical, challenging smirk, questioning the corporal's sudden change of heart after he had already given up. A sound cuts through the air. The narrator recounts the battle between Aurelia and Asvin, revealing it was during this conflict that he first died. Ankrid swings his sword down in a heavy strike while Saxon raises his spear to parry the attack. A voice states, "This is the battle it relives again and again." Ankrid charges down the sloped terrain, launching a powerful overhead sword strike at Saxon, who braces himself and raises his blade to defend against the attack. Ankrid grits his teeth in a pained grimace, a blade piercing his shoulder and blood marking his body as he remembers dying and waking up repeatedly to learn beast heart from Rem. Encred's purple eye glows with energy as he stares forward with intense resolve. A vast army of soldiers stands in disciplined formation, armed with spears and shields under a fiery sunset sky as a voice declares that today will be the day. Encred roars intensely while armed soldiers charge forward. Encred fights amidst a chaotic battle, surrounded by numerous combatants as he acknowledges this is his 21st time fighting this battle. A blade is held to Encred's head as he thinks that he has memorized everything that happens by now. Encred's face distorts from the speed as he narrowly dodges a sharp blade flashing past him. Encred dodges a spear from behind, then brings his shield up to block a second attack as sparks fly from the impact. Encred stares forward with a pained yet determined expression, sweat beading on his skin. Encred looks down at a dead soldier while another man screams, identifying the body as Vel from the other squad. Rem grits his teeth with intense determination, his two swords flashing in a rapid blur. He dies. A broad-headed arrow speeds through the air. Encred raises his shield to block a sword strike as an arrow flies past him. Encred looks up in shock, throwing his arms up to defend against an airborne attacker plunging toward him with a dagger. Saxon wields his sword in a chaotic battle as Rem screams in distress and Encred lies defeated on the ground. Encred takes a slash across his armored shoulder and neck. He notes the man always died even after being saved from the arrow, marking the first mission as clear. Encred sheds a single tear which rolls down his cheek. Encred plunges his sword into Saxon's arm, and blood gushes from the wound. A sharp blade's tip drips fluid onto someone's head. Encred sweeps his sword in a powerful arc, standing amidst defeated enemies on the dusty battlefield. Encred's determined face is partially obscured by his helmet, his left eye emitting an intense red glow against the fiery background. Encred stands victorious and formidable on a battlefield littered with numerous fallen soldiers and their discarded weapons. A disembodied thought reveals Encred has stabbed the victim in the neck 20 times. Encred exhales sharply, holding his sword with a focused gaze as he prepares for his next attempt. Encred brandishes his large sword, the blade's edge glowing intensely against a backdrop of fire and swirling dust. A single thought solidifies into a firm resolution to survive. Rem calmly watches a battle axe rapidly twirl in the air above him. Encred's bandaged hand and another bare hand firmly grab the thick weapon, stopping its movement. Encred swings his axe with his bandaged arm, forcing Saxon to recoil upward in shock. Encred holds a blunt weapon over his shoulder, his expression stern and determined as he looks directly ahead, warning that such a mistake on the battlefield is a fatal one. Rem speaks with intense focus, explaining that courage is necessary and composure cannot be lost under any circumstance, demanding one become a man with no conception of death. Encred's intense blue eye glares wide, partially obscured by his dark, spiky hair. Encred's eye glows wide, his facial expression strained with sudden realization. Encred lunges forward, aiming his large, weathered sword straight ahead. Encred stares down with intense concentration at the beast heart. Encred firmly grips the hilt of his longsword, its blade pointing downwards as faint particles shimmer around it. Saxon stands with his back turned, looking off to the right as warm light highlights his metallic shoulder plate. A decisive refusal materializes as a single, absolute word. Encred's pupil flares with an intense blue light, signifying the new power he has gained. Encred swings his large shield in a powerful, sweeping motion. Encred grits his teeth in severe strain, his heart thumping loudly as the massive blade presses against him. A human heart beats heavily in the darkness. Encred stands in his armor, his successful attack complete as his opponent is thrown into the background amidst falling debris. Encred stares forward with a strained and determined expression, sweat dripping from his face as he thinks about the 21 attempts it took. Encred's eye is visible from behind his helmet, the pupil glowing a distinct red as a reddish light reflects off the metal. He thinks with triumphant relief that he finally dodged. Saxon swings his sword at Encred, who twists his body to deflect the incoming strike with his own blade. Encred immediately counters, his blade descending in a blur of motion and radiating light. Rem screams in intense distress as a hand below him firmly grips a slender metallic spike. Encred's eye glows as his pupil turns a bright blue and purple energy emanates from it. Encred fatally strikes his unhelmeted opponent in the head with his sword, causing a large gush of blood. Encred screams in agony as blood splatters from his mouth and across his face. Something heavy hits the ground. A shovel sinks into dark, rippling water as a voice declares he is trapped, doomed to repeat this day again and again. Encred kneels in a small boat on dark water, facing away from a glowing, translucent spectral entity holding a lantern as it tells him he suffers and despairs. Encred's face is grim and weary as a voice tells him to surrender, get on the boat, and accept his weakness to rest in peace. Encred kneels with his head bowed and his hands clenched on the ground as glowing concentric purple lines emanate from beneath him. A voice denies reality as the world fades to black. Encred smirks defiantly, his left eye glowing intensely with blue energy. An unseen voice calls Encred a scumbag. Encred raises a large frying pan in defense, blocking a metal ladle that he mistook for the tip of a sword. Encred gets dressed while Rem sits quietly nearby. Encred turns to Rem, telling the corporal he is up on time for once. He moves steadily forward. Encred stares forward with an intense gaze, his hand tightening into a fist. He declares he will try again for the 22nd time. The bloodied knight pushes forward through the chaos, defending with a shield and wielding a sword against multiple foes. Encred's purple eyes glow with focus as he stares downward at the tip of a glowing blade, having a clear realization on the 33rd day. Encred swings his sword in a wide, powerful arc. Encred's sword continues its wide arc toward Saxon, who braces for the impact. Rem realizes he must turn his body and reposition before Saxon can complete his own defensive maneuver. A sword blade slices into Saxon's head, causing blood to spray from the impact. Encred squeezes his eyes shut and grits his teeth as blood splatters across his face, realizing his opponent is much too fast. Encred collapses to his knees on the dirt ground, blood dripping from his armor. Saxon collapses, his upper body severely injured and bloodied, a prominent medallion hanging from his neck. An ornate circular artifact containing a starry cosmos rests on the bare ground. He recalls the time when he was a mercenary. Encred leans exhausted against a tree, panting heavily as he looks over the corpses of the wolf-like monsters surrounding him, his bloodied sword resting nearby. Encred stands injured in the forest, panting heavily from exhaustion while clenching his blood-stained sword. He cannot comprehend the situation, thinking only of how he helped them. Rem, injured and stained with blood, struggles to walk along a forest path past the bloodied corpses of two large monsters. A villager clasps Encred's hands, explaining, "It is all their poor village has to give." Encred holds a serious and determined expression, his blue eyes focused and faint scars visible on his face. Encred holds an ornate, circular charm with a glowing, starry blue center. The hooded figure extends a hand, a sinister smile on its mouth, and states the payment was too small for risking its life, offering instead to grant their most fervent wish. Encred lies injured on the ground, his eyes locked on a glowing pendant as he wonders if it is the cause of his repeating day. He questions if this is all so he can get closer to becoming a knight. Encred steps over two defeated opponents lying on the ground amidst discarded swords and a dropped locket, stating, "You must be in great pain." Encred stands over the defeated Saxon, raising his sword to strike. Saxon lies injured on the bloodied ground. Encred states he will show mercy. Encred's purple eyes widen in fear and disbelief. Encred's helmet is cast in shadow, a single red eye glowing from within the darkness as he is partially obscured by a large, blood-stained sword against a fiery sky. Encred's eyes glow red as a dark grin spreads across his shadowed face. He is a twisted soldier who thrills in killing. Encred thrusts his spear forward, impaling Saxon through his armored chest. A hand vigorously strikes a metal pan with a ladle in front of the fortified settlement. Encred calmly watches as a small bug crawls out of Rem's boot and up his leg, causing Rem to shout in enraged surprise. Encred sits upright in his bed, shouting down at the bandaged Rem who stands calmly below him. Encred plants his boot down, crushing the surface underfoot. Encred looks forward with determination, demanding to be taught Beast Heart as Rem listens intently. The sun flares brightly in a clear blue sky dotted with soft clouds. Rem swings his hatchet in a swift, blurring arc. Encred's brow furrows as his blue eye narrows into a glare. Rem lands a powerful punch on his dark-haired opponent, sending the man recoiling from the impact. A bandaged arm presses a curved blade against Encred's throat, forcing his head back. Rem stares intently, his face showing clear confusion. Encred confronts Rem, demanding to know what he has done to become so fearless overnight. Rem states that he has been training. Encred refutes this, insisting that it is not something one can simply train to achieve. Encred stares forward with intense blue eyes, a bead of sweat rolling down his scarred face as he reveals he learned his tribe's secret technique through death. Encred stands shirtless beside Rem, who wears a black shirt, as they talk outdoors. He dismissively states it doesn't matter, explaining that a man picks things up here and there. Encred stands with his back turned, holding a sword in one hand while reaching with the other to draw the halberd strapped to his back. Encred stands firmly with his sword in hand, looking directly forward with a challenging gaze as he demands a spar. Rem looks upwards and to the side against a blue sky. Rem, a man with graying hair and a beard, shows a wide, confident grin against the blue sky. He realizes that despite learning Beast Heart, he will simply die again if he fails to strike back. Saxon swings his large axe downwards at Encred, who looks up with a startled expression. Encred swings his axe in a rapid flurry of attacks as he taunts Rem. Rem dodges each strike, weaving his body around the weapon's path while Encred demands to know if dodging is all he can do. Encred moves in a flash, declaring he knows only one style of swordsmanship. Encred looks up with a strained and alert expression as a blade slices past his head. Encred grimaces intensely, clenching his jaw with visible strain as he identifies the opponent's technique as the Valen mercenary style, an unconventional style created by a mercenary named Valen. A character staggers, his leg buckling as he loses his balance on the dirt path. Saxon falls backward through the air, having lost his balance completely. Encred descends from above, raising two axes to attack his vulnerable opponent. Encred plants his foot firmly into the ground, bracing his body with force. Encred drops to one knee on the dirt path, gripping his sword as he prepares to unleash his final move. Rem snaps his head forward, his stern expression shifting to one of sudden realization. Encred's red eyes glow from behind his mask as he thrusts his blood-stained sword forward. Encred lunges forward with his sword, dashing towards his target at high speed. Encred brings his axe down against Saxon's sword, their weapons clashing as they meet in mid-air. Multiple swords spin rapidly as they fly through the air over the dusty ground. Encred's eyes widen in distress as he extends his hand forward, a sharp ringing sound suddenly starting. Encred's face is cast in heavy shadow, his intense red eyes glowing from the darkness as he recalls imitating the sick soldier with an unsettling expression. Encred clenches his gloved fist and looks down, sweat covering his face as he remembers the thrust that has killed him dozens of times. Rem looks down at his bare torso, scratching his chest in confusion as he finds no wound or blood. Rem grimaces while critiquing the thrust, calling it the best move yet, but stating it should have had a much more violent impact. Encred stares in disbelief, his intense blue eyes widening in shock as he clenches his fist. Saxon stands with his back to the viewer, looking down at Rem. He calls him Corporal and tells him that he doubts himself too much. Encred's intense blue eye narrows as he voices his opponent's inner thoughts, questioning what they will do if their attack is blocked or fails to connect. Rem stares intensely and aims his pistol forward, declaring that his opponent should be thinking the shot is unavoidable and that they are now dead. An unseen character states that he would not have lost his sword. Encred stares forward with a determined expression and clenches his right fist. Encred lowers his gaze, looking down at his gloved hand as he understands the explanation. Encred leaps into the air, driving his sword down in a powerful thrust that pierces his opponent's shield. Encred winces in agony as a torrent of blood gushes from his mouth, splattering across his hand. Encred stands over his defeated opponent as dusk falls on the battlefield. The man lies on the ground, choking and gasping for breath, unable to rise. Encred lies defeated on the ground, grimacing defiantly as the tip of a blood-stained sword hovers over him. Saxon lunges forward, plunging his sword into Encred as he lies defeated on the ground. Encred concludes he must thrust at him with the intent to kill. Encred screams in agony, reeling from a sudden and violent impact. A large sword falls from the sky, its blade crashing into the ground and separating Encred and Saxon. Encred's eye glows red as he pulls his lips back into a wide grin, revealing sharp teeth and promising to show mercy. Encred lunges downwards, stabbing his sword into an obscured opponent below him. Rem attacks his opponent, who blocks the forceful strike, but he resolves to advance one step at a time, refusing to be stopped. Saxon appears behind Encred and drives a blade into his back, promising to show mercy half a step at a time. Encred lies on the blood-soaked ground, a sword driven through his torso as he grimaces in pain. Encred glares furiously with a bloodied mouth, driving his blood-splattered blade forward. The 23rd day begins. Encred's eye glows red as he holds a blood-splattered weapon from which blood drips. He declares he will show mercy. Encred lunges forward, driving his sword through the armor of an opposing soldier on the battlefield. Encred screams, his face contorted in agony as it reflects off the sword blade held above him on the 124th day. Encred raises his bandaged arm to deflect a large blade, his eyes glowing. Rem grimaces as he wields his axe, the powerful impact of the clash reverberating through his body. Encred clenches his jaw, his face contorting in pain as he holds a large, stylized energy construct in front of him. Rem stares in shock and distress, a bead of sweat visible on his face as he asks if someone has gone mad. Encred grips the hilt of his sword with a bloodied hand as blood drips down the blade. Encred grips his sword hilt tightly, his gloved hand bleeding from the strain. An unseen voice asks why he is smiling. Encred grits his teeth in extreme strain as blood splatters onto the white surface below him. He finally mastered the twisted soldier's thrust. Ankrid screams from the intense strain, sweat pouring from his face as he pushes himself to move faster. He possesses a firm determination to kill. Ankrid, his armor splattered with blood, swings his sword down with fierce determination. Ankrid swings his large sword in a forceful upward arc, his expression determined. Ankrid's blade scrapes against an unseen surface, generating a shower of sparks from the impact. Ankrid leaps through the air and drives his sword down into an armored opponent's shoulder. Ankrid grimaces in pain as blood erupts from his body, his first attempt ending in failure. Ankrid's eye glows with a determined purple light, held wide open. Ankrid's hand tightens its grip on his sword, his knuckles white amidst a battlefield littered with blood and fallen arrows. He fought him over and over again. Ankrid takes a punch directly to the chest, his eyes widening with shock and pain as the impact radiates outwards. Ankrid pants heavily inside his helmet, sweat covering his distressed face as fire burns in the background. Ankrid stands over a defeated person on the ground, his large sword poised above them as a fiery battle rages in the background, and he declares that he will show mercy. Ankrid stands hooded and masked, his bloodshot eyes staring forward intensely as the sun sets behind him. Ankrid lies on the ground, his face filled with terror as he stares up at the blood-stained blade poised above him, its reflection shining in his eye as his attacker tells him, "This is the day he dies." Ankrid bares his sharp teeth in a confident, sinister smirk and lets out a short laugh. A weapon pierces an armored individual, causing a significant splatter of blood. A circular, intricately designed pendant glows brightly, its cosmic, star-filled center shining against the darkness. A small, dark, winged object flies rapidly across the background. A boot slams down, crushing something beneath its sole. Ankrid stands with his hands clasped and a knife at his hip, stating he saw it go in. Saxon sits looking surprised by the declaration, while Rem and another figure observe from the background. Rem demands the other person show their gratitude by covering her mourning duties as they turn and walk away. Rem stares with wide eyes, his face a mask of pure disapproval and outrage. It is the 105th day. Ankrid looks to his left, his eyes wide with surprise. Ankrid confronts a man and demands greaves, a shield, and daggers, promising to pay for the equipment later. Rem agitatedly tells the stoic gray-haired man that he takes payment up front, making a one-time exception for him before complaining about Corporal Ankrid's unusual orders. Saxon sits on a crate and confronts a burly man, accusing his group of shifting their responsibilities. He states they have no conscience before threatening the man, asking if he would like an axe in his skull. Auden speaks a blessing while shaving a man's head, who looks uncomfortable as another waits calmly. Rem watches them intently from the side, thinking to himself that something is off about the corporal. Ankrid glares forward, his purple eyes glowing intensely with a bloodthirsty look. Two colored energy projections slam into each other, the forceful impact generating a shockwave and scattering debris. Ankrid brandishes his sword, his face contorted in agony as he shouts about the excruciating pain he feels every time he dies. He wonders what will happen if he never wins, even after thousands or tens of thousands of tries. Ankrid stands in darkness, his armored form emitting a red aura and his eyes glowing. He contemplates finding an escape, wondering if he would wake up in the same place or if a new day would begin. Ankrid stands exhausted within glowing concentric circles, clutching his sword and wondering if his newfound strength is enough for him to finally settle down. A declaration states that is not a choice. Ankrid stares intensely off-panel, his expression resolute as he focuses on his need to surmount the challenge ahead. Ankrid holds his sword as blue energy emanates from his armor, facing Saxon across the top of a vast stone wall that separates them. Ankrid executes a powerful blurred strike, having mastered Beast Heart through repeating this day. A blade thrusts into a dark mass. Ankrid lunges forward with an enraged expression, swinging his blade with immense speed and force. Ankrid hangs inverted in mid-air, forcefully plunging his sword downwards as he vows not to squander his blessing. Ankrid plunges downwards in a blur of motion, his expression locked in concentration. Ankrid swiftly unclasps and removes the armor from his leg. Ankrid raises the wooden shield, his expression determined. Ankrid's eye glows with a red light, his face set in a determined expression as he declares he will move one more step forward. Multiple hooded figures stand against a fiery backdrop, each one holding a large scroll high into the air. Ankrid, Auden, Rem, and Saxon stand together on the cracked, dusty earth, remaining vigilant and ready. An army of armored soldiers roars and surges forward, wielding swords and spears. Ankrid stands resolute on the chaotic battlefield, armed with a sword and shield, facing the numerous figures arrayed against him. Ankrid raises his shield and blocks the powerful full-body attack from his armored opponent, attributing the successful defense to his preparation, luck, and composure. Encred struggles on the chaotic battlefield as an enemy warrior raises a large club to crush his shoulder. Saxon turns and slashes an armored enemy with his sword, splattering blood from the wound. Encred fights with a determined expression, wielding his sword and shield in a blur of motion. On the 71st day, someone cut his leg from below, and he failed to even reach the twisted soldier. A sword slams into an armored leg, sending sparks flying. Encred slams his shield down onto the opponent on the ground. Encred lies injured on the ground with his shield nearby as a flying axe approaches him. He grits his teeth, recalling his death from this exact attack on the 89th day, and understands he must kill the attacker to prevent him from interfering in the fight with the twisted soldier. Encred unleashes a powerful spinning attack, creating a massive area of effect that devastates the surrounding enemies. He states this is not hard, as he has mastered many throwing techniques. Encred screams in frustration during a chaotic battle, thinking that after he completes the sequence, Bel is always behind him. Encred braces his wooden shield against an impacting projectile, the force creating a visible shockwave. He identifies his attacker as the archer Falconclaw, but knows he has no time to go after him. Encred swings his sword downward in a powerful arc, striking both Saxon and Rem, who struggle and recoil from the force of the blow. The armored figure performs a swift, powerful slash with his weapon. A declaration states it is time to face the wall. Encred swings his sword in a wide, sweeping arc, cutting down the surrounding enemies as they fall defeated around him. Encred's visible eye glows an intense red from behind his mask as tendrils of energy flare outward. Encred furrows his brow, his blue eye fixed forward with intense concentration. Encred and Saxon face each other with swords drawn, poised to strike as a massive battle rages behind them. Encred lunges forward in his patterned armor, swinging his weapon. Encred strains and grits his teeth, bracing himself against a powerful explosion as debris and energy erupt around him. Encred sharply evades an attack as debris explodes near him, realizing he cannot win by just dodging and thrusting and must instead outlast his opponent. Encred clashes swords with the infantryman, the impact sending sparks flying as he recognizes his opponent, fights with the skill of a master, a true genius. Encred's eye widens in surprise as he aborts his charge to block instead, his flustered reaction revealing a lack of experience. Encred's head is violently knocked sideways from the impact of a powerful punch. The unconventional Valen mercenary style is effective on him. A dark, wing-like cape sweeps across the red landscape at high speed, emitting a trail of smoke. One combatant drives a fist directly into the other's chest, the impact sending a spray of debris exploding outwards. Encred screams as he lunges forward with his sword raised. Encred's eye is wide open and bloodshot, reflecting a bright light with frenzied intensity. Encred brings his large sword down in a powerful, swift swing. Encred gazes upward with a strained yet determined expression while moving at immense speed, particles flying past his face. Encred and Saxon fall through the air while numerous combatants fight across the burning battlefield below. Encred's eye glows an intense red from within his helmet as he moves at extreme speed. Encred's eye flashes as a purple energy concentrates within his pupil. Encred's voice declares that he knows everything there is to know. Encred hurtles through the air, surrounded by glowing particles and intense streaks of energy. A voice speaks about the previous thrust. Encred grimaces intensely from the strain, thrusting his arm forward with immense effort. Two blurry, sharp-edged shapes of gray and reddish-pink slice through the air at high speed. Encred grips his sword hilt, his blade shattering the large geometric crystalline structure. A gloved hand firmly grips a spear, pointing the tip downwards. A vertical beam of light pierces the fiery sky as countless arrows and swords fly through the air around it. Encred extends his gloved hand toward the large fallen sword resting on the ground. Encred crouches low and grips his sword tightly, surrounded by a chaotic and fiery battlefield under a grim sky. He declares his victory. Encred unleashes a wide, sweeping sword attack across the battlefield. A rapidly spinning disc-like object cuts across the purplish-orange sky at high speed. The large axe swings in a wide arc, sending debris flying against the sunset sky. Encred's face distorts as a weapon strikes him, his eye widening in shock as blood sprays from the point of impact. Encred screams in a rage and charges forward while Rem reaches out from behind, desperately trying to hold him back. Saxon impales an armored knight, driving his sword straight through the soldier's mouth. Encred gushes a massive amount of blood from his mouth, his eyes wide with shock from the severe injury. Armored soldiers clash in a chaotic melee, their swords striking steel and sending sparks flying through the air. Encred stands on the battlefield at dusk, gazing up at streaks of light falling from the sky while a second warrior stands with their back turned. Countless soldiers clash swords on a battlefield under a twilight sky, their battle illuminated by raining fiery particles. Encred gasps for air, sweat dripping down his face as his expression contorts with pain and shock against the glowing sky. Encred's purple eye is shown in a close-up, a single bead of sweat rolling down his temple. Saxon collapses, blood pouring from his wounds as Encred stands above him looking down. Encred stands resolute with his sword raised, facing an unseen opponent while armored soldiers with spears and flags are positioned in the background. Encred stares forward with determination, a drop of sweat on his face, and declares that he will show mercy. Encred leaps through the air, bringing his sword down on an armored opponent and sending the soldier's helmet flying from the impact as other men watch from the ground. Encred stares forward with intense, wide eyes as sweat drips down his face, one eye glowing with a purple light. Encred stands on a broken stone surface as dark energy swirls around him, looking up at a sky filled with massive, shattered fragments of the wall he declares has been conquered. Encred recoils violently from a powerful, unseen impact, his face twisting in a pained and shocked expression as his body arches backward. Encred tumbles backward through the air, injured as the fiery battlefield rages below him. Encred lies on the ground, screaming as a powerful impact crushes his body. A warrior swings his sword, striking a knight across the chaotic battlefield as the bandaged Rem stares in wide-eyed shock. Encred gathers his power, his muscular form emitting a soft glow as his long braid hangs down his back. A character cries out in disbelief, seeing a frog. Encred stares forward intently, his red eyes fixed and his golden facial markings visible. Encred stands triumphantly over his defeated opponent, who lies on the chaotic battlefield in pain. Saxon speaks with disdain, stating he spent a lot of time training the person who fell to such an unworthy opponent. The figure in ornate attire slumps forward, a massive amount of black fluid bursting from their head. Encred gasps for air, his teeth clenched in extreme strain as sweat drips down his face. Encred leaps into the air, swinging his large axe downwards as he yells, "Die!" A large axe swings down, trailing glowing particles and streaks of motion as it descends. Encred and Saxon slam their weapons against each other, the powerful impact creating a burst of sparks between them. Rem delivers a powerful downward strike with immense force. Encred looks up as two axes collide in mid-air, creating a shower of sparks. Saxon grits his teeth with an intense expression, moving at high speed. Encred stares forward with intense focus, his pink eyes glowing as the golden symbol on his forehead shines. Encred and Saxon trade blows, their weapons clashing violently and sending sparks flying with each impact. Encred stands over the prone figure on the debris-strewn ground, aiming his spear down as the defeated person screams. Saxon drives his sword through his opponent's body, his red eyes glowing as blood splatters from the wound. Encred lunges forward with his hand outstretched as Saxon assumes a defensive stance, his weapon a blur of motion. Encred and Auden clash in dynamic mid-air action, their bodies colliding above the chaotic battlefield at sunset. Rem holds his curved blade with a confident smirk, declaring that anyone who wants to kill their corporal must get his permission first. Auden looks down with a disdainful expression, questioning if the feeble worm he faced was the corporal. Rem holds his axe, contemplating his foe's nature as a frog, a species born for battle, and realizes the only way to kill him is by burning him with magic or stabbing his heart, acknowledging what a pain it will be. Rem stands focused in the fiery battle, his red eyes glowing as he clutches his weapon's hilt, and he wonders why a warrior of this level is in an insignificant fight before resolving to kill him. Saxon intensely grips his axe, his red eye glowing as a reddish aura envelops him, and he resolves to fight with his life. Encred slides on his webbed feet across the cracked, arid ground as sparkling embers drift around him. Saxon stands on the battle-scarred field under the red sky and lets out a powerful roar. Encred stands with his back turned, observing the chaotic battlefield engulfed in flames under an orange sky. Encred turns from the fiery battlefield, glaring intensely while gripping his axe as blurred armored figures clash behind him. Encred's boot makes a series of quick, decisive taps on the wooden floor. Encred strikes Saxon, launching him into the air. Encred grimaces in the middle of combat, his face spattered with blood as he battles blurred figures in the background. Saxon swings his weapon down in an overhead attack, but his opponent dodges swiftly to the side near a sword lying on the ground. Encred delivers a powerful, sweeping strike with a large weapon, his form blurring from the intense speed of the attack. Encred's sweeping strike lands, splattering blood as the battlefield descends into a chaotic melee of trading blows. Auden's system displays an error message indicating the analysis has failed. Encred's eye glows with a red-orange light, his expression locked in intense focus as particles drift past his face. A battle standard with a sword emblem waves over distressed soldiers shouting for a retreat beneath the fiery sky. Encred stares forward, his eye partially obscured by dark hair as glowing particles float in the air. Armored soldiers clash on a dusty battlefield as the sun sets. Two large armies collide, their weapons striking shields and armor across the field. A single drop of glowing blue liquid hits a dark, reflective surface, creating a splash and sending out ripples. Encred lies on his back with his blue eyes wide open in defiance as a declaration hovers over him, stating that he has survived the day but nothing more. Saxon stands over the unconscious Encred, who lies defeated on a glowing blue surface. He holds a luminous, mystical object and tells Encred that he will continue to face more walls and will not be able to endure. Encred's eyes are closed, his face illuminated by a faint blue light as dark, glowing purple energy encases him. Encred lies prone with his head down, one arm extended forward in a clenched fist as he questions his fate. Encred falls headfirst into a dark abyss, clutching a tightly bound object as he plummets past crumbling stone structures. Encred stands with his back mostly turned, facing a hooded figure who holds a glowing lantern against a backdrop of swirling blue energy and stars. Encred stares forward intently, his blue eyes glowing. Encred stands cloaked in shadow, a blue glow illuminating the subtle smirk on his face as he says he will be looking forward to it. An unseen entity declares its desire to see its opponent broken and torn. Encred lies in a bed, heavily bandaged. He looks up with a pensive expression. He looks up at a patterned, domed ceiling within a vast, dimly lit chamber, his eyes focusing on a single lantern hanging from a wooden beam as he questions where he is. Encred stares forward with a serious expression, his blue eyes focused as he states their destination is the infirmary. Rem looks down at a bandaged man lying on a cot and informs him that he has been asleep for 2 days. Encred sits on a cot, his body covered in bandages. Saxon leans over him, asking if he remembers being saved from a frog. Encred looks up with a confused expression, questioning the word frog. Encred clutches his heavily bandaged torso and grimaces in pain, questioning if a frog was the last thing that attacked him and expressing his amazement at being alive. Rem tells his bandaged friend that while he didn't break any bones, his head was badly shaken and asks if he still remembers him, his best friend. Encred grimaces with his messy dark hair framing his face, stating they have never been friends and calling the other person a noble killer. Rem forcefully grabs the younger man by the face, his hand silencing him. Encred supports the exhausted Saxon, guiding him toward a bed as Rem silently watches from an adjacent cot. Encred, his face and hands wrapped in bandages, turns to cast an intense look to the side. A military encampment of large tents stands under a clear, bright sky. He'd escaped today, started a new day, and survived. Christ leans back with his arms crossed and eyes closed, demanding the corporal repay him threefold for the cost of his placement. Encred, with small bandages on his face, looks to the side as he realizes how a lowly infantryman like him ended up in the infirmary. Encred lies in a medical bed, covered in bandages. Saxon sits on an adjacent bed and confronts him, accusing him of being absent from the battlefield as usual. Encred remains silent, looking away. Encred relaxes in his bed and smiles at the injured Saxon in the adjacent bed, telling him to pay him back twofold as a special discount for his favorite corporal. Encred sleeps in a bed inside his tent as the sun sets outside. Saxon of the 4th Squad stands calmly with his hands behind his back, looking subtly to the side. Encred lies in bed, wrapped in bandages, and stares directly at the person beside him, demanding to know what they want. Encred tosses a small, round object onto the bed where the injured and bandaged Saxon lies. Encred stands by the window holding a curtain open, telling the bandaged Saxon to apply the ointment twice a day and not reveal its source. Saxon lies in bed, looking up at Encred as he speaks. Saxon applies the ointment to his stomach, recognizing it as the one Encred often uses and questioning why he would share something he usually keeps for himself. Auden, a member of the 4th Squad, weeps while shirtless, clutching a small, ornate, shield-shaped emblem. Encred stirs in bed next to a person with long light hair, mumbling in his sleep as the morning light fills the room. Encred looks upward with a determined expression, telling an unseen entity to leave and stating that he is not going to die. A military encampment is pitched under a starry night sky, and a person sleeps inside one open tent. Encred lies awake in bed, his arm and face covered in bandages, thinking about why people are taking turns to visit him when they never seemed to care before. Encred lies down with his eyes closed, bandages covering his head and cheek, as he wonders if the others are genuinely worried about him. Encred pushes open the tent flap and steps inside to find Saxon lying injured and asleep on a bed. Encred looks at the injured Saxon on the bed, but his analytical vision fails and the scene before him distorts. Ragna, a member of the 4th Squad, looks up with a surprised expression while holding a small, reddish object against the twilight sky as a voice off-screen demands to know what the corporal is doing in the infirmary. Encred eats an apple while observing the injured, bandaged man resting in the bed behind him. Encred lies down with bandages and medical patches covering his face and arm as he recovers. Rem sits up on a cot inside the infirmary tent, observing two other injured individuals resting in nearby beds. Rem lies in a bed with a bandaged arm, his expression annoyed as he asks what the other person is looking at. Encred sits and looks off to the side with a thoughtful expression. An unidentified man observes the injured Encred, who stands shirtless with bandages wrapped around his arm and torso, and wonders how someone of such a low rank managed to get inside. Encred, with bandages on his cheek and jaw, looks intently to his right. Encred looks forward with a neutral expression, while Saxon performs crunches in the background. Encred sits up in bed, his body covered in bandages, and looks towards an armored figure with long blonde hair and pointed ears whose back is turned to him. A pointed ear is framed by light-colored hair against a clear blue sky. A sword hilt wrapped in green vines is secured at a figure's waist, held in place by a light garment and a decorative spiked belt. Saxon stands outdoors in ornate armor and a cape, holding a helmet under her arm. Saxon looks forward with a serious expression and asks who here is the 444th squad leader. Encred looks to the side with a contemplative expression, bandages covering his cheek and chin. The title, "The Night Only Lives Today," is displayed along with the credits. Visual analysis fails due to a data processing error. Rem looks to the side with an expression of surprise and concern, questioning if he is seeing an elf. Encred, an armored elf, interrogates a soldier about his affiliation while Rem stands shirtless and silent beside them. The soldier identifies himself as platoon leader Venzens of the 2nd Company. Encred stares directly forward with a stern expression and piercing green eyes, asking if it is customary to greet a superior by referring to them by their race. Encred leans over a bed with his bandaged arm, looking distressed as he asks for forgiveness. Encred looks intently to the side, a bandage on his cheek, and realizes he is looking at a superior, the new 4th Company commander he heard about. Encred stands in full armor at a tent's entrance and formally introduces herself as the 4th Company, 4th Platoon, 4th Squad Leader. Auden looks to the side, mentioning he has heard someone is doing a fine job with a difficult squad and states he looks forward to seeing more of what they can do. Encred stands wounded and confused, watching the blonde-haired woman turn and walk away after delivering her message. Encred halts mid-stride on the grassy path, one ornate boot paused above the ground. The man on the bed asks for a name, and Rem looks back, completely surprised by the question. The blonde man looks to the side with an awkward expression, hesitantly identifying the person as Cran. Encred thinks the man's story sounds made up and finds his attitude too casual for a company commander, leading him to wonder if the man is nobility. Rem looks forward with intense determination, his green eyes fixed on something in the distance. Saxon strides out of the tent with his long blonde hair and cape flowing as Encred watches him from inside another tent's opening. Encred, his cheek and jawline covered in bandages, looks off-panel with a pensive expression. A vast tent structure with 2 red flags stands before a mountain range under a starlit, twilight sky. Encred clenches his hand into a tight fist. Encred reaches forward and stretches his hand, splaying his fingers. Encred, with his arm bandaged, feels his strength returning as the pain subsides and determines it is time to start training again. Encred sits on a bed pulling on his boots while another man watches him. The man asks where he is going, and Encred replies that he is heading to the training grounds. Ren lies on the bed and calls the man at the window a fool, questioning the use of a lowly foot soldier training so hard. Encred looks directly forward with a neutral expression, his hands clasped together. A colossal, blade-like crystal structure reflects a radiant sun against a twilight sky scattered with clouds. Encred stands alone in a military camp at sunrise, holding his sword and reflecting on the last battle, remembering a lesson he learned from costly classes in his youth. Encred's face is a mix of pain and determination as blood splatters around him from an impact. He thinks about giving his everything in that final lunge, questioning what would have happened if it had failed. Encred holds his sword up to the sky, wondering if he made the right choice by betting everything on his last attack, knowing he would have died if it had failed. Encred focuses intensely, his bandaged arm visible as he thinks about Rem's menacing axe strikes, believing that with such power he could maintain a constant flow of attack, but Rem's voice interrupts his thoughts by telling him he works hard. Encred stares forward, his purple eyes widening with an intense, focused expression. An error occurred while processing the panel data. No narrative can be generated. Encred stands in the military camp at dusk, holding his sword while speaking to Saxon, who has his back turned. Encred explains he was strengthening his grip and is now reviewing the last battle. Encred stands with his sword questioning the squatting Saxon, who looks at the ground and explains he did it so he wouldn't die. Encred rests their chin on their fist with a calm, cynical expression, questioning what someone plans to become by protecting their own life. Ingrid's expression is determined, his blue eye locked forward with intense focus. They reveal their dream as something that always invites laughter the moment they say it. Ingrid gazes upwards, admitting he reached his limit long ago because of his lack of talent. Ingrid's hand clenches firmly around the hilt of his sword, his grip tightening with resolve. The blade of his sword reflects the sunlight against the sky, with the distant mountains visible in the steel. Ingrid holds his sword aloft against a bright sky, his expression focused as he looks upward. Ingrid looks forward with a contemplative expression as a single leaf floats down behind him. Ingrid's blue eye is shown before he looks up at a blonde-haired person while holding their hand under a clear sky. He tells them they are the first. The person asks what he means, and Ingrid clarifies they are the first one not to laugh. Ingrid leans forward with his eyes closed, stating that he forgot he should laugh but has just remembered something. Rem turns his back and walks away, announcing that watching the other person has made him realize what he must do. Ingrid looks intently to the side, his purple eyes revealing a determined expression. Saxon smiles gently and looks to the side as petals fall around him. A thought concludes with the realization that no one has ever encouraged them. Large, light-colored tents with red flags form a military encampment at the base of distant green mountains under a clear sky. A minstrel plays a lyre for a group of soldiers sitting on the ground in a military camp, prompting them to chant the name Cyprus in response to his song. Rem shouts with an angry expression, demanding his breakfast. He questions if he will be fed only after the other person has digested their own food, complaining that he woke to a minstrel song and has been waiting. Ingrid stands over Saxon, who is seated and working with a tool, and asks him why he took a walk instead of training before inquiring about his injury. Ingrid looks calmly off-panel, stating that the ointment helped a lot and offering his thanks. Saxon looks down pensively as he speaks, telling his superior to show gratitude by returning to duty. A lit candle on a tall stand illuminates a wooden table with a single mug resting on it in a dim room. A blonde character sits on a bed and wishes Ingrid a good night. Ingrid lies in bed, covered by blankets, and says, "You too." He then went to sleep early. Ingrid, Saxon, and Rem lie in separate beds within a dim, communal tent, as Ingrid complains loudly and asks what has gotten into the other two. Ingrid lies asleep on his side, illuminated by a warm light. Ingrid sits up in bed with a troubled expression, holding his head as he hears shouting outside. He wonders internally why the wandering minstrel is back again, questioning if the minstrel understands the meaning of wandering. A man screams aggressively for breakfast, complaining about the delay. Rem sits calmly on his bed, ignoring the commotion as he looks out the window at the distant fortress walls. Ingrid focuses intensely, his blue eye narrowing with determination. Ingrid presses his hand against a surface, his face slick with sweat as his heart pounds in utter disbelief. Saxon sits on a wooden crate, whittling with small knives as Ingrid stands before him, looking up to ask the corporal about his injury. Ingrid expresses his gratitude, confirming the ointment helped him a lot. Saxon lowers his gaze, his long, wavy hair falling around his pensive face. Ingrid's heart thumps and his weary eyes widen as he realizes it's the same day again. Ingrid lies unconscious, enveloped in a glowing purple energy as a luminous object floats near his hand, while a voice warns him he will face another wall and questions if he can survive this time. Ingrid looks up with a wide-eyed, distressed expression, realizing he might have died in his sleep. Ingrid stands on a glowing cobblestone path with his sword sheathed, staring into the distance and recalling his insulting powerlessness. Ingrid looks upward with a stern and determined expression, surrounded by faint blue energy particles, stating that the difficulty will just make overcoming this wall more rewarding. A system message announces it is time for another challenge. A star-filled night sky with streaks of light illuminates an encampment of tents flying red flags across a mountainous landscape. A single lit candle sits on a wooden table next to a wooden mug, its light illuminating the dark room. Ingrid lies awake in bed, analyzing his own death as he stares at the ceiling. He questions how an enemy could bypass the many obstacles to reach him, concluding that the killer must have been a knight at the very least. Ingrid's eye shines with a determined gaze as he realizes the quiet assassination was likely an inside job. A search begins for someone who knows the location of the infirmary and can kill quietly. Auden looks down, his green eyes focused and his expression set with determination. Ingrid stares forward, a warm light illuminating his purple eyes as he contemplates his next move. Ingrid descends through the starry night sky, his long hair and cloak flowing as he passes before the large full moon. Saxon, dressed in armor and a cape, steps out from a tent into a sunny military camp. An unseen character decides to see for himself, realizing the infirmary has only one entrance. He plans to shout and wake the other soldiers the moment the assassin appears, believing it will be over instantly. Ingrid's purple eye is wide with intense focus as he thinks that all he has to do is wait. Ankrid lies on the ground, a thin weapon pierced through his upper body near the neck as his eyes widen in shock. Ankrid's eye widens and sweat beads on his temple as he realizes he was struck by a poisoned dart. Ankrid is violently jolted on the bed, struggling in sudden agony. He screams out that he didn't even see his attacker as his body thrashes in pain. Saxon tumbles from the bed onto the floor, his body completely paralyzed and unable to move or speak. Ankrid's expression is grim, and his purple eyes glow intensely as he realizes a powerful poison is the reason he never knew he was attacked. Auden lies on a bed, critically wounded with a spike embedded in his neck. Drool leaks from his mouth as he struggles to speak, mumbling about the others and the Venzins. Ankrid watches from the foreground as a hooded figure stands over a sleeping person's bed. Ankrid grits his teeth and glares upward, blood smeared around his mouth from the strain. He lets out a shout, his expression a mix of pain and determination as he locates his target. A cloaked assassin stands over a bed, raising a sword to strike the person lying within. A sword plunges into Ankrid's chest, his eyes widening in pain as blood spills from the wound. Ankrid stares forward with wide, bloodshot eyes as blood drips from his mouth. Ankrid grits his teeth, his bloodshot eye glowing with a wide purple pupil as sweat beads on his temple. A blade slashes through the air. A hooded Ankrid is in the foreground as Saxon appears behind him, looking upward with a subtle smirk. Ankrid's face is strained with effort, sweat beading on his brow as his left eye glows pink and his right eye turns purple. An error message appears, indicating that the system analysis has failed. Ankrid clasps Saxon's hand, his arm wrapped in golden leafy vines. The hooded Saxon stands by the window in the dimly lit room while a distressed Rem huddles behind a wooden frame, shouting in realization. Ankrid, a hooded elf with long pale hair and pointed ears, looks off-panel with a serious expression.